NIL has changed the college sports landscape and universe in a big way, and haters are going to hate, but all I got to say is BYU is in it to win it.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first to listen to the day, and more importantly, thank you to all of you who we lovingly call our everydayers right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to get in on the action with our friends at the FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about BYU and their NIL backing. We'll also talk BYU and Cincinnati on the hardwoods. Can the Cougars sweep the Bearcats in the season series coming up tomorrow? And then we'll finish up today's show with our weekly mailbag from our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, so a story came out earlier this week from Myron Medcalf at ESPN, and in it, it's talking more about BYU basketball with regards to their NIL funding, and as he mentions here, at a table near the back of the brew pub, speaking of Strap Tank Brewery up in Lehigh, Paul Lillenquist, one of BYU's most active boosters, took a sip of water and made a declaration that he and his colleagues, after they had committed almost 8 figures to secure A.J. DeBonsa, in an attempt to reshape the college landscape. He said this, quote, and this is the quote that's got everybody talking about BYU sports, quote, "You're not going to outbid us," unquote. I love it. BYU, as I said in the open of today's show, is in it to win it. This shows that BYU has their booster base, and it's a deep and it's a diverse booster base. It's not just Ryan Smith. Paul Lillenquist here runs a $500 million company, CEO of Focus Services, $500 million valuation. He is one of, I don't even want to guess, dozens, if not more than that, boosters who have got insanely deep pockets and have ponied up to help BYU, as Myron Medcalf highlights here, try to transform the college basketball landscape, but overall the college sports landscape, and make BYU a bigger player in it. This is a big deal. Now, in the story, Myron Medcalf says that BYU paid $8.5 million for A.J. DeBonsa's signature. Now, that has gone, remember the rumors were $4 million, then the reports were $7 million. Now it's $8.5 million for A.J. DeBonsa to come and play at BYU. I think it's money well spent, because the simple fact of the matter is the exposure that BYU will get from A.J. DeBonsa playing in Provo, it'll pay that back and then some. They're already talking about BYU playing Duke in Las Vegas early next season. We've already heard from John Rothstein yesterday of CBS Sports that BYU will play in the Diamond Head Classic out in Hawaii over Thanksgiving weekend next year, which is one of the premier MTE, midseason tournament events. It's got the best teams usually playing in it. There is a lot going on with BYU and their overall NIL donations, and you can tell that it gets under the skin of opposing fan bases, none more so than that little old school right up north in the University of Utah. I keep seeing it on my social media feeds. We talked about it on my radio show yesterday. We mentioned about the situation and that quote there, "You're not going to outbid us." The response was, "You can buy anything with money," from a Ute fan. So be it. The haters are going to hate, but BYU, they're playing by the rules. That's the simple fact of life right here with what BYU is doing. A lot of people out there will claim that it's a bad image for the church and it's bad business for the church to get into this action. Many of you who are Cougar fans are aware that BYU Athletics is an entity unto itself. Yes, they are part of Brigham Young University, but the BYU Athletics department gets no funding from the university, no funding from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in particular tithing dollars and the like. Everything the BYU athletic department does with regards to money has to be self-funded. And if boosters, like a guy like Paul Lillenquist here, I'm sure Ryan Smith's donating at some level. I don't proclaim to know the inside details of all this. But if these boosters want to help BYU play by the rules that are currently in effect, hate on, because BYU is here to change things up. The other thing I was told by a source that I trust implicitly, and the thing is, in the story from Myron Medcalf, said there was a meeting shortly after Kevin Young was hired that they had a bunch of high-level boosters get together. The estimation was that the net worth of the people in that room was $10 billion, billion with a B, $10 billion. I have been told by another source that BYU has had other meetings with high-level boosters, and the one that told me about it said they were in a meeting where he estimated the overall wealth was in the hundreds of millions. Now, that could easily move into the billions category, and said that BYU's in it for basketball, but they're also in it for football. Where's the difference? Because I've had a couple of questions. There's a big question here from our insiders group. I'll get to it right now. It says from Byron. Has BYU football received an increase in donations and NIL money since our team went 11-2? Everyone loves a winner. Well, the indication is that yes. What I have been told is BYU's this booster group. They're part of the Royal Blue Collective to a level, I'm sure. They're individually donating money to BYU athletics, earmarking it for whatever they're interested in doing. The NIL atmosphere has completely changed for BYU. And these boosters, they want to do nothing more than to go out and help BYU win on the biggest stages. And that would mean winning national titles. That's the end goal, I think, for a lot of these folks. The results obviously have to match up with what these boosters are interested in doing, or they may decide to pull back and withhold some funding. But the bigger point to be made here is the boosters, they're motivated, they're engaged, and they want nothing more than to see Brigham Young University represented on the national level and go out and win at a high clip. Kevin Young, he is going to have every resource available that I think can be given to him via this booster group. I trust, based on the conversation I had with a couple of people, that Kalani Sitake already has that and will continue to have it, if not have it increased in coming days, weeks, and years to help BYU football build, as Byron mentioned, off an 11-2 season. Literally everyone loves a winner. They want to attach themselves to a winner. And if you can prove you can win at a high level, people want to be in on that action. So once again, the haters are going to hate, tune them out. BYU, when the rules became what they are today, where money is able to be free-flowing to these athletes, great. BYU's playing by the rules. And if you're, I'm going to say it, your penny-pinching program or university isn't willing, or your fan base, your donor base isn't willing to pony up, sucks to suck. That's the simple, long, and short answer of it all. BYU doesn't suck right now. They have got deep pockets, and it comes from these boosters. And like I said, they are highly, highly motivated to let BYU go out on a win on a national level. And that should excite you as a Cougar fan. Now, once again, the results have to match. And I know that is relative to what your expectations are versus maybe what these boosters are versus what the inside BYU athletics. All the expectations are the BYU and BYU athletics can be that proverbial front porch of the university, represent BYU on a national stage, and also put on a good product and win and help attract people to BYU and, by extension, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Let's just acknowledge a spade for a spade. That the overarching theme of what I want to pass along to you guys is, yes, BYU is in the NIL game and they're in it in a big way. And that should scare some people out there. The other thing I love about it is it's going to give BYU every opportunity to go out and compete and win and do everything they have aspired to do for literally decades. We are now entering the 41st year since BYU hoisted a national championship in college football. How long will it take before they have another chance to win another one? TBD. BYU basketball, they have that ignominious mark of being the team that's appeared in the NCAA tournament the most in its history without a Final Four appearance. I think a lot of people want to get that monkey off the back of the BYU basketball program, and I think it extends to other programs as well. BYU athletics wants to be the most robust it possibly can be. And I know that football and basketball take the lion's share of the attention. This podcast, 95+% of it is focused on those two sports. But it's because those are the chief revenue operators and they are the chief attention receivers or getters for BYU athletics. And these boosters want to put the money in and put the money where their mouth is. Good on them. And let's accept it and have some fun along the way and hope that BYU can make good on the bet being put on them by these boosters as well. All right, coming up next, we talked about BYU basketball needing to win at a high level. Well, they got a big opportunity to bounce back from a tough loss against Arizona. Can they go to Cincinnati and get the season sweep from the Cincinnati Bearcats? We'll talk about that and preview it next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Of course, the big game is almost here. There's no better way to make it even more exciting than with our friends at Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. The best part is, here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least two players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash invested. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game this weekend where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard. Count it, 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. It's as simple as that, my friends. So take advantage of it today. Check out the promos tab to tell any of the super sweet Millie winners, big game lineups. And if you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you could you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege right now. You also get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with our friends over at Prize Picks. And as they like to say, Prize Picks, it's where you can run your game. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well on this Friday, getting ready for a fun weekend out there wherever you might be. But BYU basketball is headed to Cincinnati. Are they going to be eating Skyline Chili? TBD. I would highly guess not, because Skyline Chili is probably not in their nutritionist plan. But I decided with Skyline Chili in Cincinnati, either you love it or you hate it. I actually don't mind it. The best way to eat Skyline Chili, eat it on a hot dog. If you've been to Cincinnati, you know what I'm talking about. That's the best way, I think, to consume it. But nonetheless, BYU is headed to face off against the Bearcats. And can BYU recreate what they did to the Bearcats in their first matchup in Provo? I'd be hard pressed to think that, because BYU shot, was it 62% from three? Like, it was just, they absolutely ran away from Cincinnati in the second half of that game. And it's probably the most impressive victory, or most dominant victory of the Big 12 season to date for BYU basketball. The thing is, BYU has to focus on this game and understand getting a split of your games, going 1-1 this week after the loss to Arizona. That's got to be the focus. You can't look ahead. You can't look back. You got to focus on the here and now, because this is a league, and Cincinnati proved it. Cincinnati and any other team out there, maybe besides Colorado, because Colorado is pretty pitiful right now. Bigger point you made is anybody can beat anybody on any given night in this league, and BYU's got to be ready for it, because Cincinnati is going to be smarting. They're going to be upset. They're going to want some revenge on BYU after that loss to the Cougars. It was amidst a 4-game losing streak. They had lost to Utah, obviously, after losing at BYU, then lost to West Virginia, bounced back with a 93-83 win at UCF earlier this week, and now they're back home looking for revenge on the Cougars. This is a big opportunity for BYU to win another road game. The latest projections, once again, from bracketologists like Joe Lunardi, still have BYU among the final 4 teams in. Well, a road win like this against Cincinnati, at worst, it's a Q2 game, and it could end up, I think it's a Q1 game technically, but depending on how the season goes for Cincinnati, could end up as a Q1 game the entire rest of the way. It's a resume-building type game for BYU, despite Cincinnati not having that gaudy of a record. They're 13-9, currently 13th in the Big 12, so really a team that you should beat. If BYU has aspirations of being middle to upper tier in the Big 12, you got to beat the Cincinnati Bearcats. Wes Miller's done a really, really good job with the Bearcats team. They've got a pretty decent roster, I think, overall. They've got a really big front court, and that could cause problems for BYU. We're noticing, I think, a trend here that teams that are able to really get on the inside and dominate BYU on the glass like Arizona did can make life difficult for Keba Keita and Fus Traore, and BYU has to find a way to battle that. Now, the way to combat that is to have all 5 guys crash the glass and obviously help rebound. And that, I think, in some ways, Kevin Young will be preaching that to his guys, but I also don't think that's a revolutionary thing. BYU's actually been a very good rebounding team for most of the season. Other things need to be cleaned up for BYU going into this game. Turnovers. BYU has to continue to monitor their unforced turnovers. These live ball turnovers, they're absolutely crippling to BYU, and there's been far too many of them. And I'm talking all season long, even in the non-conference. There have been games where you're like just scratching your head saying, what's it going to take for BYU to figure it out with regards to giving the ball away in bad spots? They've got to avoid that, and especially in a circumstance like this. Hostile crowd, hostile environment, and you're on the road 2 time zones away. You have to be able to manage the game well, and that is going to require guys to be smart with the basketball. No getting up in the air and throwing the ball away. No finding yourself in a bad position and just turning it over. BYU has to be better about managing the overall tenor of this game. And the other part of this is, can we see a better free throw shooting performance? Now, here's the deal. The more I watch college basketball this season, especially in state, Utah State, Utah, etc., I think it's just an issue across college basketball. For whatever reason, the art of getting free points, it's called a free throw because you have nobody in your face. You're shooting at the line. It seems to have gone by the wayside to a level. Is it mental? Is it just getting reps up? Is it shooting 100 after practice every day, 1,000? I don't know. But free throw shooting will forever bug me as a Joe Blow who sits on his couch and critiques high-level athletes. I just don't get it. It seems like it should be something that BYU should be better at, and I hope that they can be better about it in this circumstance, because they struggled on Tuesday night against Arizona. In our postcast, I failed to note that. A number of you pointed it out in the comments, and for good reason, because it continues to be an issue, much like the turnovers for BYU, the inability to rebound against some of these bigger lineups in the Big 12. Those are key things BYU has to focus in on this game. I think they can take confidence from what they did against Cincinnati in that first matchup at home and say, hey, these guys wilted in the second half. Let's go do it again and run away from these guys. Richie Saunders had one of his very good performances in that contest. The bigger point to be made is they have to do it as a team. You need to see guys, and it could be Richie Saunders. It could be a Dallin Hall. It could be Yegor Demon. It could be Fousseyni Traore. Somebody is going to stand out in this game for BYU, but as I said on our postcast from Tuesday night after Arizona, Yegor Demon led BYU with 16 points. Nobody else seemingly went with him. And what I mean by going with him is having that second and third scorer that goes out there and helps lead BYU to a victory. You've got to have the contributions from across the roster. You're always going to get consistent contributions from guys like a Dawson Baker. And that's 8-10 points a game. That's great. But you need more from your star players. And like I said, that's Richie Saunders. That's Yegor Demon, Cannon Catchings, Fousseyni Traore. They've got to regain their ability and forget. Like, you got to just get past Arizona and say, here's Cincinnati. Let's handle our business here, and let's get back to 5-4 in conference. Excuse me, not 5-4. They're better than that right now. But they were 5-4 after the Arizona game. They're 15-7, sixth in the Big 12 right now overall at 6-5. But I look at this as a big opportunity for BYU, notwithstanding Cincinnati being bottom tier of the conference right now. But they're very capable of beating BYU, and they'll be feeling pretty good about themselves after snapping that losing streak against UCF. So those are what I'm looking for in this game, and we'll see how BYU handles it. But I've got confidence that Kevin Young will have his guys paying attention. They'll be locked in, and fingers crossed they can go out and get a big road victory. And they'll stay out on the road, obviously, going to West Virginia on Tuesday. So it's a big back-to-back set here for BYU if they can pick up 2 road wins in successive order. But you got to handle the first one, and that's the Cincinnati Bearcats tomorrow. All right, more questions coming up from you, our listeners from the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Some great stuff on football and basketball. We'll delve into all those next in our weekly mailbag edition with our Locked On Cougars Insider Group next, right here on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, and of course, endless possibilities. There's a better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. The best part is whether predicting the first touchdown, calling who the MVP is going to be, or even betting on the coin toss, heads or tails. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle, and hopefully pick up some wins along the way. The live betting feature allows you to stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win up to $200 in bonus bets off the Super Bowl, hey, that's the icing on the cake. So download the app today or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets from our friends at FanDuel. It's FanDuel.com to get started today. Bet with FanDuel as they are an official partner of Super Bowl 59. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you'd like to be able to ask questions in our Locked On Cougars Insider Group mailbag each week, well, you got to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. There's a link in the show notes below. Get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks to see if it's right for you. Join up today and be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, on to the questions here. I already answered one from Byron earlier, but he had a second one, so let's get to his second one first. I would like to know how many people have signed up for your Insider text messages. Do you have a goal for the number of subscribers? Now, that's an interesting situation because I don't really have, I guess, a overarching goal of how many people I want to be part of the Insiders Group. Frankly, I want everybody to be a part of the Insiders Group. I don't proclaim to be the ultimate insider when it comes to BYU athletics, but anything I hear, and I've built up, I think, a pretty good base of what I like to call my hashtag sources that feed me information, and the people who hear it first are our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. So if you want to be a part of it, I guess I didn't really have a goal and all that type of stuff, Byron, but my goal, I guess, in the end is to have everybody be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group along the way. Other questions here. Jared, for the mailbag, do you think that what do you think the chances are that Cannon Catching stays around for another year at BYU? TBD. Now, he had that phenomenal performance against Baylor, and I said it on that podcast, and I still believe it. He made himself NIL money and NIL. Yeah, he made himself NIL money, but he made himself NBA money with his performance against the Baylor Bears. The biggest question was, is it going to be a consistent thing? Could he follow that up? Well, it's been a little quiet since then. I don't know what Cannon's got in his mind. I know that he came in as getting hype as a one-and-doner, a guy who go to the NBA draft this spring. That very well may be the case. But I think that he is, so long as he feels like he is progressing in this program, he ultimately may decide to stick around for another year. I don't proclaim to know what's going on in Cannon's mind. I can tell you if he starts to really catch fire down the stretch here, I'd be hard-pressed to believe he's coming back because when it comes to the NBA, you got to strike while the iron is hot. And if you're hot as a player, and like he is at 6'9", length, shooting, the athleticism he possesses, NBA teams will scoop him up, and he may decide to ultimately head out. All right, Steven has a great question here. It seems to be very few transfers out of BYU. This is a very good sign. It's got to be a very satisfying thing for the coaches. Are there any statistics by programs that measure net gains and losses of player talent from year to year? It's a great question, Stephen. I think the bigger thing is they may have KPIs, key performance indexes. Right? Look at me using technical jargon. But the thing is, I think they may have some KPIs internally. I'm not privy to what those KPIs are. But BYU, as I've said it before, is a school and I guess in this sense, football and basketball program that seems to be more transfer proof than most because we all know that BYU stands for more than just playing athletics. And going back to the original topic of today's show, there's some out there who say, well, BYU just in it for, you know what? You can think that all you want, but BYU is going to hold to its ideals. And that requires guys to come in and abide by the honor code. It requires pretty stringent academics initially get into school and obviously to stay up at BYU as a university in terms of your schoolwork. And the other thing is requires high level performance. So I think BYU is a fairly transfer-proof place because it seems like when people come to BYU, come to Provo, majority of them seem to really enjoy it. Yeah, there's going to be people who are not comfortable or don't like what BYU and Provo have to offer. Sure, those people, you've helped find them the next stop. Kalani Sitake has talked about that. He is more than willing to help guys find a place where they are going to thrive, even if it isn't BYU. I think Kevin Young would have a very similar sentiment. I haven't heard him verbalize it, but I think he would be in agreement with that. And I think the bigger point to be made here to what you're asking, Stephen, is BYU is pretty lucky. They've had very few transfers out, and guys who do transfer out, by and large, they're guys looking for extra playing time or more playing time because they're stuck down the depth chart at BYU. So that's the thing about it. I think that they are doing a good job making sure the guys are loved up in the program, taken care of NIL-wise, all that type of stuff. But at the same time, understanding that BYU stands for more than just playing sports. Let's see other questions here. Mark, I'd love for you to name your next insider for next season. I think he's speaking of like player guests for the season. I'd love to hear how off-season workouts are going. If there's the same intensity there was last year, and how does this team react now to having a target on their backs while still being regularly disrespected? I think your final point there, Mark, is the best one. they do have a target on their backs. They're one of the favorites in the Big 12, and the disrespect out there, I've chronicled it. 24/7 Sports saying that they shouldn't be ranked in the preseason. We've got a guy like Josh Pate saying that BYU should go back to independence and a reformation of the conferences. Great. Be disrespected all you want. Use that chip on your shoulder, but also understand that teams are gunning for you after what you accomplished last year. That it's kind of it's a two-edged sword there, but I think BYU's up for it. What I've heard with regards to workouts is BYU's getting after it. We've seen some snippets. They had a tug of war contest the other day. It was cool to see guys like Keanu Tanavasa front and center in that video, obviously hyping up his teammates. I do know that BYU has named their offseason captains. If you're an Insiders Group member, you would know who they were a few weeks back, actually, because I passed that along to you guys. And they have broken up the team into teams. They have groups of guys, and they compete on an everyday basis in the weight room, in school, in the community. And at the end of the offseason workout period, I think it's like an 8 or a 9 week period here leading up to BYU spring ball, they award a winner. So it's cool. They're staying competitive. They are absolutely engaged. And who my insider is for next season, Mark, when I know, you'll know. It's probably the best way to say. I was happy for Mark Pope and totally understand him leaving, but was agitated when he took Jackson Robinson, and I was really mad he commits Colin Chandler to transfer, and he also tried to get Richie Saunders to transfer. I now find myself cheering against them. What are your thoughts and any chance that Colin could enter the transfer portal? Kentucky is what it is. It's a thoroughbred. It's a blue blood that BYU aspires to be. And Mark Pope, he won a national title there. His dream job was the Kentucky Wildcats. BYU was a great place. And being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he appreciated, I think, being at BYU, but his heart was set on climbing the ladder to be the head coach at Kentucky. So you may be unhappy about it, but I actually say, you know what? Mark is right where he needs to be right now. And I believe that's where he needs to be because he wanted to be there. And yes, taking Jackson Robinson with him, Colin Chandler with him, that may irk you, and obviously his pursuit of Richie Saunders. But the bigger point you made is Richie Saunders spurned Mark Pope and came back to BYU and is thriving here in Provo. Every situation, the grass is not always greener. And Kentucky, they're doing their thing. And I think Mark Pope, he will be successful at Kentucky with the resources, the talent he can recruit, his love of that university, and his love of that program. That's going to lend itself to, I think, some pretty special stuff. I do admit, I did find it funny that Coach Calipari took Arkansas, who's been struggling this year, back to Rupp Arena, and guess who came out on top? That would be Coach Cal. And he was very quick to tell his guys to start barking at fans. You can tell that Coach Calipari was happy to get a W in front of the people who cheered him on for over a decade in Lexington. But I guess, Gary, I'm not all that upset about it. I don't know about chances Colin transfers. I know that he absolutely loves Mark Pope, and I think he would be hard-pressed to leave, but who knows? Transfer portal is a weird thing, and we'll see what happens at the end of the season. Final question, I should say, from Bryce here. Are there any upcoming freshmen you're particularly looking forward to, including ones on missions? It's a very good question, Bryce, and it's actually a guy who's technically a transfer, even though he's also a signee with the BYU football program, and it's Hunter Clegg. I watched Hunter Clegg play at American Fork High School, and he was just dominant. I don't know how long it's going to take him to get the mission rust off of him, but I'm telling you, Hunter Clegg is the type of defensive end that Jay Hill has been salivating and hoping to have in this program for quite some time. And it's nothing against guys like a Tausilia Kana. Who else am I thinking of? Of Kini Lafonahema. Those guys who have talent. But I'm telling you, Hunter Clegg, what I saw from him in high school at American Fork was just otherworldly. And I am excited to see him in Provo. Other freshmen, that's a good question. I'm looking forward to seeing what Ethan Thomason brings at offensive tackle. Similar to Hunter Clegg, he's coming home off of a mission, but Ethan was a phenomenal offensive line prospect when he was in high school, and he's dealt with some health concerns while out in the mission field, had to come home for a spell and then went back out and finished his mission. He's now in Provo. Aaron Roderick highlighted him. He's all of 6'8". He's got that tall, he's long, he's got those long arms. Linemen usually take a little longer to get ingrained into the programs. It may take a full year for him to really get up to speed, but I'm excited to see what Ethan Thomason can bring to BYU. And those are just a couple of guys. There are so many guys that kind of swim through my mind on a daily basis, and I forget like what age or what eligibility status they are for guys, but those are two probably, Hunter Clegg and Ethan Thomason, but feels like there's a handful more that I'll think of as soon as I push stop record on this podcast. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to push stop, and Bryce may text you individually if I think of some other names, but nonetheless, truthfully, appreciate all the support, all the love you guys send, I should say, every single day here on the podcast. Our download numbers, interaction, the overall, like I said, the love you guys pass along has never been stronger here. So once again, as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Please subscribe, rate, review, share with your family and friends, like this show, do whatever you got to do to help us build the audience and be everydayers. Once again, with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.